Okay, so originally I wanted to do a Halloween special discussing the very first scary movie that I could ever remember watching that legit scared the hell out of me. And I think that's probably why I correlate the two. It's the most memorable because it didn't just scare me, it traumatized me. I'll explain it in a minute, but I couldn't even drink milk for like 4 years, or at least I had trouble drinking milk. Not directly related to what's in the movie, but indirectly in a way, and I'll get to that. But the reason I said I wanted originally to do a in-depth breakdown, not like analysis, because this is just a really independent horror movie, but kind of go through the movie and break down different scenes. Here's, the setup for the story, the characters, here's the kills, and yada yada yada. Like a long-form review. Anyhow, I ran into a problem. I have this on Blu-ray. It is a remastered. It looks gorgeous. I'll give you 2 examples of how the Blu-ray looks, and then I have a digital copy that I can use for editing, and I'll give you an example of how that looks. And the dark scenes, which there's a lot of nighttime or dark hallway scenes, a lot of those you can't even see the screen because the digital copy that I have for editing is that poor. However, I don't know how to rip it. Normally for editing I'm using digitals. However, I'm going to find a way to get the high def, the remastered version, and then maybe we'll revisit this. So instead, for the Halloween video, I thought it'd be fun to stick with this, but also branch off on what got me interested in the horror. Because it was getting scared. It was that extreme sensation of fear and excitement that gripped me and was like, I want more. Even though you're terrified at times, Candyman's another good example. And I laugh now because it's absolutely ridiculous. But I remember my aunt, she rented Candyman on VHS. I'm my daughter's age or younger, watching shit I probably shouldn't have been watching, but I don't care because it spawned this love for the horror genre. But Candyman, they don't even have a scene, I don't think, but it's a flashback where someone's telling the story of this kid who takes a shit in like a public restroom and gets his insides, guts ripped out by the Candyman, But the Candyman was one that freaked me out. That came a little bit later, but originally it was some independent stuff like this. When I was growing up, Jason was like a tradition. I was real little in the 80s. Jason was coming out with a movie almost every year. I think they skipped 1 year. It's like 1983 or some shit like that. There was no Jason movie. But I'm pretty sure 81, 82, 84, 5, 6, 7, yada, yada, yada. So there was a Jason movie the whole way through. And I remember Jason Takes Manhattan being my favorite, but it's twisted because it wasn't my favorite. It was just the more relevant. And now when I think about it, that's because that was on TV, that was having commercials, that was being released when I'm like 6. So I'm starting to, these are memories that I can remember. I don't remember when I'm 3 and 2 years old, when earlier Jasons came out. So when Friday the 13th, Jason Takes Manhattan comes out, I remember the commercials. I remember it being on TV. I remember some of the gimmicks. Jason Voorhees being on the Arsenio Hall show. You know what I mean? Anyway, so the house on Tombstone Hill. Again, I'm just going to assume an aunt rented it for me. It's a story about a few friends that go to this mansion. This classic, way too big, ridiculous. There's no explanation on why they bought it, why out in the middle of nowhere. I mean, it's just pretty much, here's a house, here's some younger kids, they're gonna get tortured and murdered in this house, and that's it. And repairing the house as a fixer-upper is just the easy idea to get them in there. But the killer, interestingly enough, is a freaky old lady who's played by one of the kids. He's played by one of the kids that gets killed first. I think his name is Mark. So essentially the kids get to this house. There's a tombstone in front of the house. I don't even think there's a fucking hill anywhere. It's the house on Tombstone Hill. I don't know if there's a hill, but this title has different names. The house on Tombstone Hill is the name that I knew it as. It's also called The Dead Come Home. And it's also called, and I think this is so dumb, but Dead Dudes in a House. Now the title might not be that stupid, but what they did is they took, hip-hop was on and popping at the time, so they took 5 guys that have nothing to do with the movie. They're not in the movie. They're not actors from the movie. They have 5 guys that aren't even in it. This really weird looking old, I don't know, crazy creepy lady on the cover that isn't the crazy old lady in the movie. So this is just some shithead put together a cover that has nothing to do with it. And they have a different title, Dead Dudes in a House. And that's how they released it. So it was released as Dead Dudes in a House, or House on Tombstone Hill, or The Dead Come Home. And it's all the same movie. And that messed me up when I was trying to buy this to do this video or to rewatch it. Because I haven't watched this since I was like 7. Or whenever I watched it for the first time. 7, 8, something like that. So if you're going to get it, it's all the same. It's just they put it out on the market with different titles. So these kids get to the house. They break a tombstone that's out in front of the house. And I guess this wakens the old lady. And the old lady is someone who used to live in the house. Someone broke into the house long ago, stabbed her in the neck repeatedly. It's not in the movie, but this is backstory. And I guess she survived. And then her neighbor came to check up on her, and she killed her neighbor. The beginning of the movie opens up with her neighbor dead on the floor. And it's just so weird and creepy because this old lady does this like this fucking mouth thing that freaked me out a bit. And it terrified me for old people. I'm not even, I hate saying like old people because we're all getting old, you know. We're all gonna get old. But yeah, she freaked me out when it came to old people. And what made it worse is you have this old being. It's never explained. She's dead, but she just woke up, so she was like taking a nap. I mean, that's weird. She just kind of sits up in bed when they break the tomb. She doesn't crawl out of the bed. She just sits up in bed. So there's these ghost elements which are really dumb when you watch it now. Maybe nostalgic if you grew up on it. But when I was little, all I remember, it's seared into my brain. That old lady with the with the lips, the tremor lips. And then you've got this guy who's locked out outside. He goes on a beer run. And he goes climbing up the ladder. And not little, she's taller than all the rest, but she's like hunched over because a man's playing her, like I said. So he's climbing up the ladder and she's just sitting there waiting for him. And I just remember it being so creepy. The hallway shots where you just see like a part of the old lady and she's creepily walking towards them and stuff, like just jacked up. So she ends up cutting his arms off. And then he falls down and he lands. And when I rewatched this blew my mind. Because this is something I didn't remember. I remembered being terrified as a kid off of this movie. But I didn't remember the details. I didn't remember I knew there was 2 things by a window. I remember he got attacked and killed by a window. And then fell, and then she threw a pole down and stabbed him in the chest. But what's funny is years later I would go on to write this scene that I thought was kind of all Mayan, where Jason would, it was like a mock Jason script, and Jason would stab this guy who's hanging out a window, and as he fell down, you know, his fingers would come tumbling down. But it's the same as, or it's very similar to this, the House on Tombstone Hill. And it makes me wonder if that memory was just like in the back of my mind, and it's because I didn't remember that at all. I couldn't picture it. When I rewatched this, I was like, oh my god. There's another one where she knocks this kid down and stabs screwdrivers through his arms and his legs. Another ridiculous one, a guy thinks he's gonna go out a window, and he gets his legs out and he's halfway in the window, and part of the window slides down and creates like teeth within the house. So the window goes up and down and just chomps this guy in half, and his legs fall out. What happens to his body now that I think about it? Because later on they show him standing up, because everyone who dies comes back as a killer ghost. So it's kind of got that messed up Pet Cemetery vibe to it. And there's no explanation for nothing, by the way. It's just like existing just to have gore and scares. That's it. I think it did its job. The top of his body is back on his legs, and his guts are just all over the place, and he's drinking beer, but I'm pretty sure it's supposed to be coming out of his guts. So as he's chugging a beer's just pouring out of his guts. So I somehow watched this movie and it fucks me up. And coincidentally, keep in mind, there's a freaky old lady, multiple murders, with that mouth tremor. For some reason, as a kid, it fucked me up. Coincidentally, my mother ended up working at a nursing home for like 2 years. She was able to bring us in. There was a few events where we went into a nursing home, really old people, And all I can picture is in the horror movie, that old lady with the power of a man, with the tremor lips. And we're in this cafeteria hall, and I think they're like playing bingo and cards. It's where visitors would come in and visit, and it's nice for them, you know, they get a visit. But back then, all I could think about is how terrified I was, because you got these old people and they got the shakes, you know, when they go to get their vitamins, their hand is shaking, and I'm thinking about this old crazy bitch from the movie with her lips doing the tremor thing, and I'm just like, get me the fuck out of here. I think I hit it really good, but I was terrified. They're handing out medicine, and I don't remember if it's milk or yogurt or something like that, but I just remember they were giving their meds, and some of them would spit it back up. Now, in my little brain, I have this memory of it just being like the blob, you know, or the stuff, you know, the white stuff, and it's just, I have this memory of it just pouring out their mouth, like old person shaking, and then this white, you know, ooze in my little brain just pouring out their mouth. In reality, it was probably like a spoonful, and they were like, take your medicine, and the old person was like, no, fuck this, I'm old, I'm cranky, I'm not, you know, doing this shit. And they spit out their medicine, and they're shaking and whatnot, yada yada yada. So my little head was terrified. We sat down to play cards with them. Now, in reality, really nice, and they loved visitors, absolutely loved visitors. And I think we went and did that like 3 or 4 times, and I was terrified every single time. But because of the connection, like I said, it's indirect, but because of being so scared with the movie, with the old lady, and then going to the nursing home, and then having the girl spit out either milk or yogurt, I don't know what it did, but it freaked me out. I couldn't have milk. I couldn't drink milk for a few years, till I was like 13, and then I was like, all right, enough of this shit. That's how long it stuck with me. I looked at milk and I just thought, gross. You know, I don't want to drink this. This is gross. This also opened up the door of horror and sci-fi. I remember, I think the reason I connect those together so much is because our local video store was like a mom and pop. Matter of fact, even in the Blockbuster, I can remember it was horror and then sci-fi on the back end. So those were my sections to go. I guess horror, sci-fi, and creature features, that was my shit. Godzilla, loved it. But there was just something about horror. So any TV shows that I was allowed to watch when I'm real young. Now, I remember watching Tales from the Crypt, but when I looked up some older episodes recently too, to kind of, because I haven't watched it since I was a kid. I always thought I want to go back and watch older stuff, but I haven't gotten around to it except for classic movies like Terminator. So I remember watching Tales from the Crypt, like that was a thing in our house. I remember that. But now when I rewatch the episodes, people are getting raped. Every other episode that I rewatched has to do with sex, and I'm sitting there thinking like, I wonder if my parents like only let us watch the ones that didn't have certain stuff, because I remember a lot of this, like the Siamese twins that wanted to have an operation. It doesn't matter. So Tales from the Crypt, I remember being a thing. X-Files, when that first came out, that was one me and my brother watched with my mother, and that one freaked me out a bit. I know there was this guy he had this real jacked up face. Dark Shadows is one I'm pretty sure we watched, and it freaked me out when I went up in the attic afterwards. I remember thinking I have this memory of just being scared but loving it. I also watched it twice by accident. My mother rented it for us, or let us watch it on TV, and then we went to a Little League party at a friend's house, and there was a handful of us kids there, and their parents rented it when it was finally out on VHS. And when we watched it there, it was like a double dose of, I remember being like, yo, I seen this, and this shit is scary. My parents and their parents, neither one of them were like, oh, that's that scary. And I remember later them saying, yeah, that was probably not a smart idea. Because keep in mind, we're only like 8, 9, you know? So a TV movie called Monster in the Closet, stupid as hell, but the monster was so neat, but it was also a ripoff of Aliens. But I just remember that monster. Cat's Eye 2 with the little troll. Again, when it comes to monsters and horror, there's just something there. I love my creature features. So the little troll, freaking fantastic. I wish they would make like a little troll something you can put on your shelf, because he looks so cool, just the idea of that. Vampires were big. Lost Boys was the shit, Interview with a Vampire, but I remember, and I can't find it. To this day, I still cannot find it, but I swear to God, this can't be just my brain. I remember a vampire movie where the tongues split open and there was little teeth in the tongues. And I keep searching and searching. I can't find any pictures, any video clips. I know when I search it, people say it's called Daughter of Darkness or something. I can't find it at all. Now, I just found that title, Daughter of Darkness, yesterday. And I tried looking it up, and it's like, there's a few different movies with that title. So I'm trying to hunt it down. I know it can't be a dream or something, but I remember watching a movie where the vampires, their tongues split open, and they had these teeth, and that's how they drank the blood. Because I remember being like, wow, that's so weird and different. And I'm pretty sure the only other memory I have is one of them getting burnt up. We're going to be revisiting these movies on the channel, but obviously one of my all-time favorite, if not my all-time favorite movie, is The Thing. When it comes to body horror, that as well as slashers was something I was in love with. The Thing, The Fly, Gremlins, I mean, come on, I shouldn't even have to say, these are classics. Child's Play. Alien is an interesting one. I even asked my brother if he remembers this, and he doesn't, but we spent the night over one of my grandmother's house, and she went to bed real early, and we had to go to bed real early, but we were still awake. And I remember seeing her VCR in the one room, so I was like, yo, let's go see if there's any movies. So we went, and we found a movie, but it was weird because it wasn't a VHS tape, it was this little one. And I didn't know what the hell this was, you know what I'm saying? I'm not at the age where I'm gonna know what that shit is. We had a VHS, that's all I knew. So I'm trying to figure this out, and here I look in the VCR, and her VCR plays little tapes. Now I think it's a beta machine. We never had a Betamax, whatever it's called. But that was the first time I remember watching Aliens. We put that in there. It was either Alien or Aliens. For some reason, I really remember Aliens, but your memory can get a little jacked up. But I remember putting that in, and my brother fell asleep, and I remember watching that and just being like glued, in love. The look of the aliens, the way it was filmed, especially the look of the alien itself it was just like, because when you get a unique monster, like the first time I saw the Predator, my eyes were glued on that monster. The design and the creation and the look of that monster was just out of this world cool, you know? There was one time where I remember vividly my mother was vacuuming, and I was like running around the house like a little idiot. Kind of like what my daughter does now, and I'm like, why are you doing that? That looks so boring. You're just like running, jumping off the couch and running in circles. But kids get energy and they run, so I'm running like an idiot. And I remember my mother was vacuuming. I think I got yelled at, like, stop it. And I went to sit in the living room, and I changed the channel, and Freddy comes on the channel. Whatever one. Nightmare on Elm Street. You know, part 1 or part 2. It couldn't have been 3 or 4 or whatever, because I was real young, so those would have been coming out at that time. And I remember looking over, and she was vacuuming, and I was just like, I'm watching as much of this as I can until she catches me. And I remember being able to watch almost all of it. I got away with that. I used to sneak as many movies as I could. Sometimes, and I'll even admit it, stealing some VHS tapes from like James Way, I think the store was called, and then, you know, hiding in my room watching a horror movie or something. That was the bomb. Because they didn't let you buy them. You had to be, you know, it was stupid. A lot of stores you can get away with it. Nowadays they got scanners, you self-scan it, and it's like, what's your birth date? But back then, a lot of times you can get away with it. But you'd run into workers who were all like, let me see the fucking rating on this movie. Like, bitch, who gives a fuck? Like, who are you, the fun police? Like, what are you doing? Just bring it up. But my all-time favorite was Jason. Now, like I said before, Friday the 13th was like a tradition. When I was growing up, now again, still, I'm born in the 80s, so a lot of it is, it's out of my control. I'm not like a teenager in the 80s where I'm like, I'm going to the drive-ins, I'm doing this. You know, if I went to the drive-in, obviously, it would be my parents taking us. Like my mother took us to see Congo and Jurassic Park. That was fucking awesome in the drive-in. Drive-in experience is absolutely awesome. So Friday the 13th was a big deal. I mean, like I said, that was like a tradition almost every year. It was coming out. There was commercials. There was promotions in magazines. Kids dressing up for it. People talking about it. Jason Voorhees was a household name. So it's no brainer when I'm in the horror section, I would look at all the movies that came out when I'm old enough to actually go in the aisle and look for myself, and I'm becoming self-aware like the machines. Anyhow, somewhere in the love for the horror genre, I remember vividly coming home and my brother got a import game for the PlayStation 1. and it was Resident Evil. Now, at this point in time, we're the only ones home. Parents are working and working overtime, and it's constantly and it's all the time. So we're legit coming off the school bus and no one's around. Heat up a Hot Pocket, and then we sit down, shut all the lights off, and we put on Resident Evil. Me and my brother taking turns. He plays a little bit, and then I'll play a little bit. And I remember this game just had us hooked. I think there was 2 main games back around that time that had us hooked like that, where we'd taken turns. We had an old poker table that we used for the table holding the TV and the PlayStation, and I remember it was Resident Evil and Tomb Raider. Those were like the big deals. Anyway, the zombie stuff was always out in some way, shape, or form, because that came out in late 60s and then 70s. This is way before my time. So by the time I was self-aware, zombies were just zombies. It was so normal. It wasn't something to discover. It was that normal. It was that well known. For Halloween, for scary movies, you know, it was just there. Zombies was always a part of it. And Resident Evil, that played a big part, a really big part in redirecting me to the zombie genre and making sure I didn't miss any additional movies, making sure I watched all the Romero movies and keeping me up to date when new zombie stuff came out. I remember the first time I saw the Resident Evil movie trailer, and I was just gutted when she ran up a wall and jump kicked a dog, and I immediately sunk my head, and I knew I'm never getting a good Resident Evil movie. Good in my opinion. None of them have been good. I think they're terrible. They're absolutely horrible. I know the game has its cheese, and yes, I get it, but for the potential there, they just haven't done it yet. But anyhow, the Resident Evil video game was so massive in redirecting me towards the zombie genre, and again, that even led me to start working on my own stuff, my own story, which grew and evolved and grew and evolved, and today I actually have a comic book for Doomsday Kingdom. So the horror genre as a whole for me was a big part of my life when it came to relaxing and enjoying myself, whether it's with family, friends, girlfriends, you know, dates. You know, horror movie on a first date ain't nothing better than that, you know. Some pizza and a scary movie, shit, listen, I'm easy to please. But not only that, when it came to a career and stuff I'm interested in career-wise, it is heavily focused in the horror genre. I mean, to me, that's the most interesting, horror and sci-fi. So you guys leave your thoughts and opinions down below. What was the very first movie that scared you, and how did that progress? Did you stay into horror? Do you dabble just a little bit? Where are your interests? Thank you very much for chit-chatting with me a little bit. I hope this video was interesting for a special Halloween bonus. We're still going to be covering the house on Tombstone Hill. I just got to figure out how to get a high-def version so I can show you clips without you going, what the fuck am I watching, bro? You know? All right.
It's your boyfriend's blood.